decorated black female general stops at a quiet Louisiana gas station. Within minutes, she's handcuffed by local police who refuse to believe her identity. What happens next turns a forgotten town into the center of a national reckoning. One phone call to the Pentagon was all it took to shatter careers and send a clear message to the world: injustice cannot hide in the shadows. What should have been a routine drive through a quiet corner of Louisiana quickly became the start of a story that no one saw coming. General Naomi Ellsworth had taken this route countless times before. No security convoy, no flashing lights, just her, a rental car, and a mission. She was headed to a confidential briefing at Barksdale Air Force Base, and distractions weren't part of the plan. But somewhere between Lake Charles and Shreveport, just outside the small town of Mosswood, her secure phone's signal began to falter. She needed to make a call. Right then, not later. Spotting a faded gas station, Kelly's Fuel and Food, with its cracked, uneven parking lot, Naomi pulled in. The place wasn't much, but it offered the quiet moment she needed. She parked near the back, away from the handful of locals leaning on pickup trucks, swapping stories in the sticky Louisiana heat. For Naomi, it was just a spot to catch a moment of calm. She stepped out, clutching her secure device, and raised it to her ear. "General Ellsworth, verifying identity, initiating briefing," she said, voice low and professional. On the other end, the Pentagon officer launched into sensitive updates, real-time orders and classified movements that only a handful were cleared to hear. Naomi's eyes flicked casually around the lot, scanning as trained, while keeping every ounce of her focus on the call. But the locals noticed. A few heads turned toward her, curious and suspicious. She didn't fit in. No badge, no uniform. Jeans, plain sneakers, an olive green jacket, and a ball cap shadowing her face made her look like just another traveler. Exactly the disguise she wanted. Yet, not everyone saw it that way. Behind the counter inside the station, Paula Sweeney watched. Mid-50s, tight blonde bun, a permanent scowl etched by years of hard judgment. Paula didn't see a decorated war hero. She didn't see a woman on a confidential call. To her, Naomi was trouble. Quietly, Paula picked up the old landline and dialed the Mosswood Police Department. "We got a suspicious woman at the pumps," she whispered. "Real shady. Might be on drugs or something. Y'all better come check it out." And then she hung up before anyone could ask questions. Cross town, 2 officers heard the call crackling over the radio. Mosswood was usually sleepy. Too sleepy. But they didn't mind shaking things up a bit. They threw on their sunglasses, climbed into their cruiser, and sped toward the station, eager for a break from boredom. Naomi stayed near her car, straining to keep her attention locked on the Pentagon's critical briefing. The information coming through was vital, no interruptions allowed. But she had no idea that real trouble was already barreling toward her. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights reflected off the station windows. The world around her shifted in an instant. The cruiser screeched into the lot, gravel kicking up under the tires. Naomi lowered her phone and squinted at the approaching patrol cars. 2 officers jumped out before the vehicle even stopped. The taller one, Officer Randall Cooper, mid-30s with a buzz cut and broad shoulders, unhooked his holster with a swift motion. Beside him, Officer Shaw Delaney, lean, younger, and far too eager, mirrored every move like men ready for a fight. Naomi felt the air tighten. Calmly, she placed the secure phone on the hood of her car and raised her hands, palms open and visible. Her voice stayed steady, controlled. The way West Point had drilled into her. "Good afternoon, officers. How can I help you?" Cooper barked back. "License and registration, now." Naomi took a half step forward, reaching slowly for her wallet tucked in her back pocket. "Absolutely. I'm active duty military, General Naomi Ellsworth. I'm on official business." Delaney sneered. "General, huh? You expect us to believe that?" Naomi produced her military ID and federal travel orders, extending them with steady hands. Cooper snatched them away, but barely glanced before shaking his head. "This is fake," he spat, tossing her credentials onto the hood like trash. For the first time, Naomi blinked, stunned. "Sir, I assure you—" "Shut up," Delaney snapped. "You think you can play us? Lady, you picked the wrong town for that." A small crowd gathered. Customers, station workers, drivers who stopped for gas but stayed for the drama. Some whispered, some laughed. No one stepped in. Naomi's training screamed at her to de-escalate, but every instinct told her these men weren't interested in answers. They had already made up their minds about who she was, and worse, who she wasn't. Her voice low and even, she tried again. "Please contact your supervisor. You're making a serious mistake." Cooper already had handcuffs in hand. "Turn around, hands behind your back." Naomi didn't flinch. She stood her ground, not out of defiance, but because something inside her snapped free. "I am a general in the United States Army," she said, voice sharp and unwavering. "You are unlawfully detaining me." Cooper laughed, loud enough for the crowd to hear, echoing off the gas pumps. "Yeah, and I'm the president now." Before she could respond, Delaney grabbed her arm roughly. Cooper forced her other wrist behind her back. The cuffs snapped tight, pinching her skin. Naomi clenched her jaw, swallowing the rising wave of humiliation. Behind her, the secure phone, still connected to the Pentagon, clattered to the ground. The voice on the other end shouted her name, but the officers ignored it. Or maybe they just didn't care. Cooper shoved Naomi against the side of the rental car hard enough to rattle the door. "Got her," Delaney said, as if they'd caught some prize. Naomi's breath came hard and fast. She stared at the greasy window of Kelly's Fuel and Food. Her fractured reflection stared back at her, broken by grime and dirt. In that moment, she wasn't a general. She wasn't even a person to them. She was just someone to be tossed around, because they could. Meanwhile, back at the Pentagon, alarms blared. The secure call had gone from routine to chaos in less than a minute. Lieutenant Commander Bryce Hanley sat behind a wall of monitors in Washington, D.C., staring at the blinking line marked Gen Ellsworth Secure. The audio was a mess. Background noise, scuffling sounds, shouting voices he couldn't make out. Then, nothing but static. Bryce leaned closer to his mic. "General Ellsworth, this is Command Operations. Do you copy? General Ellsworth, respond." No answer. Colonel Dana Sharp strode purposefully across the Pentagon operations floor, her voice cutting sharply through the steady hum of monitors and chatter. She ordered Lieutenant Commander Bryce Hanley to ping General Hanley's location immediately. Seconds later, a blinking dot appeared on the map. Far from the base, stalled at a gas station just off Highway 171 in Mosswood, Louisiana, a speck on the map most Pentagon staff had barely heard of. Sharp leaned in close to Bryce, jaw clenched. "Get Barksdale security on the line. Patch me through to Jag. If anything's happened to Naomi, we move. Now." Back in Mosswood, Naomi sat on the cracked curb, handcuffed, her back pressed against the weathered wall of the gas station. Officer Delaney loomed over her like a shadow from a nightmare, his voice cold. "What's your real name? Who do you work for?" Naomi exhaled slowly through her nose. "You have my ID, my travel orders. Everything you need is right there." Cooper snorted. "Lady, you're 2 seconds from being booked for obstruction. Don't push it." Naomi said nothing. She refused to give them the satisfaction of watching her beg. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed phones quietly raised, recording the scene. Across the lot, Paula, the station manager, stood with arms crossed, smirking like she was watching a backyard wrestling match. The chaos spun out of control, and no one made a move to stop it. Suddenly, Delaney's radio crackled. "Dispatch to Unit 3. Confirm you have the subject detained." Cooper grabbed the radio. Affirmative. Female, early 40s, refusing to cooperate. A pause. Then the dispatcher's voice cut in, firm and unmistakable. Be advised, subject is flagged federal. Repeat, flagged federal. Pentagon has initiated emergency contact release. Stand by for further orders. Blood drained from Cooper's face. Delaney's smirk vanished. What the hell? He muttered. Naomi remained silent, staring calmly up at them. Cooper fumbled with the keys, unlocking the cuffs without meeting her gaze. He muttered something that sounded halfway between sorry and ma'am, but lacked the courage to say it properly. Naomi rose slowly, flexing her wrists where the metal had left angry red marks. The crowd fell silent. Even Paula's smirk faded. She picked up her cracked phone from the ground. The screen showed connection lost, sensitive information, possibly compromised. Naomi locked eyes with both officers. "You're going to regret this," she said quietly. "Not tomorrow, not next week. Today." Cooper opened his mouth to argue, but new flashing lights bathed the parking lot. This time, a convoy of black SUVs from Barksdale Air Force Base, tires screaming against the asphalt. But Naomi wasn't waiting for backup. She was already preparing herself for what was next. The SUV's doors swung open almost simultaneously, like a scene from a movie. But there was no glamour in the way Barksdale officers moved, only urgency, no smiles, no greetings, just clipped orders and tight, focused faces. Leading the team was Lieutenant Colonel Darren Mosley, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, no nonsense. He crossed the lot in long strides, a folder tucked under one arm. His gaze locked immediately on Naomi. "General Ellsworth, are you injured?" Mosley's voice carried clearly across the lot. Naomi shook her head. "No, Colonel. Minor abrasions. The bigger injury was to their careers." Cooper and Delaney shifted uneasily, realizing far too late just how deep they'd sunk. The Air Force security officers closed ranks around Naomi, positioning themselves firmly between her and the Mosswood cops. Without hesitation, Mosley turned to the local officers, face stone cold. "You are hereby ordered to stand down pending federal investigation. Any further action on your part could be construed as obstruction of justice." Cooper stammered, "We didn't know who she was." If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps give light to voices that deserve to be seen and heard. "Cut's not an excuse," Mosley cut him off. "You had documentation in your hand. You had everything you needed." Delaney tried to sound tough. Still, she was acting suspicious. Mosley fixed him with a long, hard stare, then quietly said, "You saw a black woman on a phone call and made a choice. That choice is going to follow you for the rest of your life." The Air Force team efficiently ushered Naomi into one of the SUVs, ensuring she was seated comfortably. As the convoy pulled away, Naomi glanced back once, just long enough to see Cooper wiping his sweaty forehead with a trembling hand, and Paula scurrying inside the station like a roach fleeing a sudden light. Inside the vehicle, Naomi said little, staring out at the endless ribbon of highway. Her thoughts raced faster than the speeding SUV. After a moment, Colonel Mosley broke the silence. "Pentagon's coordinating a full investigation, ma'am. Internal Affairs, Civil Rights Division. It's going public, whether Mosswood likes it or not." Naomi neither nodded nor smiled. She didn't flinch. "They should have known better," she said simply. Mosley nodded. "They're about to find out what it feels like to be seen for who they really are." The convoy surged forward, passing fields of tall grass and leaning telephone poles, speeding toward Barksdale Air Force Base, where Naomi's authority and dignity would finally be restored. But Naomi knew the real battle was just beginning. This time, the whole country would be watching. News of the incident hit national headlines before Naomi even finished her debrief. Someone had posted the cell phone footage online, raw, grainy video showing two Mosswood officers handcuffing a woman, who calmly explained she was a U.S. Army general. No shouting, no resistance, just the unmistakable look of someone stripped of dignity by people too blinded by arrogance to see it. By morning, the story had spread like wildfire. Mosswood was no longer just a dot on Louisiana's map. It had become the epicenter of a rising national outrage. News networks replayed the footage over and over. Commentators shook their heads in disbelief, while civil rights leaders called it a blatant case of racial profiling and abuse of authority. Even veterans organizations, usually cautious about wading into politics, issued statements demanding justice for General Ellsworth. Back in Mosswood, the local police department scrambled to contain the damage. Chief Vernon Grady, a man more accustomed to hunting deer than handling media storms, stood before a sea of cameras, sweat beading under his cowboy hat. "We regret the misunderstanding," he stammered, avoiding eye contact. "The officers involved have been placed on administrative leave, pending a full review." A young reporter from Baton Rouge cut him off sharply. "Chief Grady, why were trained officers unable to recognize clearly presented military credentials? Was race a factor in this so-called misunderstanding?" Grady faltered, mumbling something about high tensions and mistaken identity, but everyone watching knew the department was backed into a corner. They had no real defense. Meanwhile, Cooper and Delaney had gone radio silent. Within hours, their names leaked, splashed across headlines, social media, and public outrage forums. Anonymous sources inside the department revealed both men had prior complaints for excessive force and racial profiling, long swept under the rug. But not this time. Civil rights attorneys from New Orleans and Washington, D.C. filed official federal complaints on Naomi's behalf. The Department of Justice launched an independent investigation. Even Louisiana's governor weighed in, condemning the incident as a shocking miscarriage of justice against a national hero. This was no longer just about Naomi Ellsworth. It was about every person who had ever been doubted, dismissed, or degraded because of a uniform they didn't wear, a color they couldn't change, or assumptions they couldn't control. At Barksdale, Naomi's days were filled with briefings, lawyers, Pentagon officials, even White House liaisons calling for updates. She answered every question with the steady voice that once commanded troops in war zones. But in the quiet solitude of her quarters, the weight pressed down heavy on her chest, not because she was surprised, but because after all the medals, all the service and sacrifice in a dusty parking lot in Mosswood, none of it had mattered. Still, Naomi hadn't spent her life running from battles, and she wasn't about to start now. But if she was going to speak out, it had to be on her terms, not just for herself, but for every silent face watching from the shadows. The press conference was set for noon on a Saturday, just outside the gates of Barksdale Air Force Base. Cameras were lined up in neat, frantic rows, microphones stacked 2 and 3 deep. Reporters murmured into phones, the air thick and buzzing with anticipation, the kind that meant something important was about to unfold. Naomi Ellsworth stood behind the podium, dressed in her full military uniform for the first time in months. Her medals gleamed against the deep blue fabric, shoulders squared, gaze unflinching. She wasn't there to entertain or comfort anyone. Colonel Mosley stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching protectively. A few senior Pentagon officials flanked him, grim-faced. They had offered Naomi carefully crafted talking points, a diplomatic path through the minefield. She politely declined. When Naomi spoke, her voice cut clear through the noise. "My name is General Naomi Ellsworth. I have spent 29 years serving this country, leading soldiers, advising presidents, defending the ideals written into the Constitution. Yesterday in Mosswood, Louisiana, none of that mattered." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "I was judged not by the content of my character, not by the uniform I earned, but by the color of my skin and the assumptions made about me because of it." Reporters scribbled furiously, but Naomi wasn't speaking for them. She spoke for the people who had seen the video and felt that familiar pang. the sharp memory of being doubted, demeaned, or dismissed. "I'm not here today for an apology," she declared. "I'm here because silence is not an option. Accountability matters, respect matters, human dignity matters. None of these are negotiable based on someone's prejudice or ignorance." Behind the cameras, members of the local community had gathered, Black families, veterans, students, holding handwritten signs. Naomi caught glimpses of their faces, some angry, some hopeful, all waiting for something they hadn't seen enough of lately: real leadership. "Injustice is not new," Naomi continued, "but change only happens when enough people refuse to look away." She finished without drama or rehearsed slogans, just the unvarnished truth. "I was not humiliated yesterday. They were. History will remember it that way." She stepped away from the microphone without waiting for questions. The applause started small, few scattered claps, but quickly grew into something real, something alive. As Naomi made her way back toward the base, she didn't quicken or slow her pace. She moved with the steady, unyielding rhythm she always had, one step after another, carrying more than just her story on her shoulders. Because she knew the world wouldn't change overnight, maybe not even in her lifetime, but maybe, just maybe, it would change a little because she refused to stay silent. When you are treated unjustly, your voice becomes your greatest weapon. Speak the truth, even when your hands are shaking. Someone out there needs the strength you show. If you believe in standing up for dignity and accountability, share this story. Speak up when you see wrong. Change starts with people willing to call it by its name. Thank you for sharing this moment with us today. Stories like these remind us that kindness, compassion, and justice aren't just ideals. They are the quiet, powerful acts that change lives and build a better world. Every small gesture, every voice raised for what is right, creates ripples far beyond what we can see. If this story touched your heart, please consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to join us in spreading hope and understanding, subscribing to Kind Light Stories is a simple way to keep the light shining. Remember, in the darkest times, even the smallest flame can guide us home. Let's be that flame together.